Good afternoon. My name is Harold Mendelson. I am a student at Liberty University in the PhD program, and my topic for this presentation is for class HIUST 703D03. My topic here is the assignment is going to be an innovator and a person that provided a major impact to others, and that would be Henry Ford. Uh, he was a man who influenced people of the United States and around the world as he eventually became uh, an international builder of cars. Uh, my focus will be on determining how much he influenced his employees, his customers, his competitors, um, the U.S. government, and in fact, the entire American and international society. Um, Wireless blog is not designed to be a biography of Ford. I have some parts of his life that are integral to this presentation, so they are included. Now, it's one thing to say that Henry Ford influence was a major influence, but how do you measure that influence? How do you determine what that influence is, and then how do you measure its impact? Well, it took some research, and I was looking through various things. And the first thing I looked at was the GDP or GNP, and I determined that even though it was fairly a lot of money, it was a fairly small percentage of the total GNP or GDP, and it would be difficult to measure accurately the impact that Henry Ford created on the world by using those measurements. So I got to thinking about it, and I determined how I would look at two things. One, I would look at his impact on the manufacturing of automobiles. And I will provide a graph in there that will show how that was implemented. Um, and two, the percentage that he had and the total number and its impact beyond the company itself, but on the purchases of cars, uh, the competition of things he implemented, like advancing the use of the assembly line, um, the impact he had on government, where he finally, just the sheer number of cars that he built required that the federal government step in and take responsibility for building a nationwide road system, which carries on to this day. Um, and the impact he had on the employees because of the way he paid them, the amount of money he paid them, uh, provided them with the ability to live a decent lifestyle. Um, there's also the impact of when the assembly line came into place of the boringness of the job because doing the same thing day in and day out, and um, how we got involved and moved people to different positions within the assembly line. And that was dual purpose. One, to keep them from getting totally bored. And the second thing was to teach them how to do the different jobs within the assembly line. And this allowed Ford that if a particular position in the assembly line didn't have enough people on the line to get the job done, that they could move people around because they would be like cross-trained. Um, Also, it gave people the opportunity to step up and go from an unskilled job as an assembler uh, to more advanced jobs where they would be tool and die makers or machinists, um, or any one of a hundreds of other positions within the Ford company, maybe even possibly become in management. Uh, and we also see how it affected it, it affected the government, because we saw that the first attempts at getting involved in building roads and the infrastructure uh, were more word, words than deeds, uh, and how it took several iterations of creating an organization that was responsible for doing that, took place and took from 1903 up till 1921 before they actually had the regulations in place and the laws in place to take responsibility and to work with the states in creating uh, a massive road system that we have today of over 4 million miles of paved roads. And yet we still have about 2.5 million miles of unpaved roads, some of which are private, some of which are in parks and stuff and by design. Uh, I think sometimes I've probably traveled over most of them, but not really, but it just seemed that way at the time. Um, the thing that's important is that he created a system of manufacturing, not just for automobiles, but for everything. If we didn't have the assembly line, there was no way in World War II that we could have produced what we produced. I mean, they were building ships, the transport ships. Every 3 days, a new ship was built. This was necessary to overcome the ships that were lost at sea through enemy action and weather and whatever. Um, Also, develop a logistics system which enabled us as a nation to supply our fighting men and to come up with a plan of where you wanted them to be, and then making sure that they were supplied with what they needed. Uh, and this was a direct impact because of the assembly line. Now, the opportunity when Ford started his company was to build any kind of car, and he had to select what kind he wanted to build. And while one partner wanted him to build exclusively high-end cars because they saw more profit uh, per car, and another two partners, the Dodge brothers, wanted him to build speed cars. And he was against that. As a farm boy growing up, he knew what it was like to be on a farm. He knew what the roads were like. And he wanted to build a vehicle that could, while not be impervious to those roads and impervious to the work involved, would allow the farmer, allow the individual owner who purchased one of these Model Ts um, to function reasonably well. Uh, One of the things in the Model T, for example, they were options. Some of them were supplied by Ford, others were by third party, which could turn the Model T into a farm implement. you could take the wheels off and put tractor treads on it. There was kits to do that. Um, there were ways to have power takeoffs from the drivetrain, and therefore you could use the car's engine to provide you power to power farming tools or any kind of tools. You could also pull farming equipment. So if you needed to plow or you need to harvest, you could hook up your Model T to whatever equipment you had and do whatever job needed to be done. You wanted to build a fence, you give it the ability to create a post hole digger, uh, and so forth. Um, this was very important. You can also see that he chose right by picking the common man's car. He looked at volume rather than exclusivity. And he was the right choice. It's like the story of the two kids that are setting up lemonade stands across the street from each other. And one kid charges $1 for a big glass of lemonade, and the guy across the street gives you a bigger glass and he charges you $3. But the value is clearly on the guy, the kid who's selling the lemonade for $1, because there wasn't enough added value to justify that $3. And so at the end of the day, most likely it would be him, that kid with the $1 lemonade, who would make the most money. Ford realized this, um, developed a relationship with the government. It was at sometimes adversarial, but for the most part, it forced the government to take on the responsibility that it should have of building roads. And it took a while to do that. He started in 1903 with the Ford Motor Company, but it didn't actually come into fruition until 1921. And even after that, it took several years to get it fully implemented. But still, particularly we see during the 20s, how many miles of road, how many thousands of miles of road were built and paved to make the interior of the United States more accessible, and how building both the Lincoln Highway and Route 66 uh, was the start and of transcontinental travel by road. It and the initial iteration of those roads were not sufficient to get the job done properly because they weren't paved, and the condition of some of the roads were impassable. But the government was responsible, and eventually it cleaned all of that up. Government never does anything in a hurry except spend money. Um, so he did that. He built his first vehicle in 1893, which he labeled the quadricycle. He built a two-cylinder engine, basically on the kitchen table. He got that running. He had built the transmission himself. He built the drivetrain. He built the wheels, or he purchased them, and the body was built. He learned all these skills, and they were well learned and needed, so that when he eventually got into the Ford Motor Company, which was his third company, he had one failure, one totally just he was basically forced out, and then finally the third company where he was successful. A true entrepreneur. He got involved in every aspect of the workings of his company. He was also a financer. He was also a marketer. Um, if you look at the logo that he had made up, this is the logo that he designed in 1907. And you can see, well, it's backwards, but you can see Ford, and that is still the logo today. And we're talking well over 125 years almost. Um, we have an idea of the assembly lines and the parts, as you can see. You can see how the height of those tables were designed so that it was comfortable and ideal for a person to work on. Up here, the assembly line showing you how they would move along and put the various parts on, and how there was like a little railing in the center, which gave them the ability to move these cars along as needed. This is a picture of the Model A compared to the Model T. And you can see how much more modern the Model A is over the Model T. And how this is a hardtop. The wheels are better. There's bumpers on them to protect them from damage. The engine is stronger. And the car just has a better appeal. First of all, it's in a different color, not just black. Here's a picture of Henry Ford taken after the 10th millionth Model T was built. He started again a marketing advertisement of taking the Lincoln Highway cross country. And they would paint it on the side, New York to San Francisco. And it actually made the trip. And next to him here, this was his quadricycle. And it's still in the Ford company ownership today. And you can see it had a little tiller in there instead of a steering wheel. No windshield, no cover, no top. So although it was functional, it was far from ideal. And the cost to him to build that was greater than he wanted to charge for the cars that he sold. This photograph over here shows a farmer who had taken a car, and in this case, he used special wheels to make him be able to pull his farming machinery back there. These were some of the pre-Model T cars that he had. This was a Model S production car. It was made just prior to when the Model T came out. And we see here another model similar to that one. I mean, they were quite interesting looking, and you could see the the brass plating on here. Uh, and this obviously is a model that has all of the bells and whistles on it. This is even another model that he had. So you can see he had a number of different models that he had over the years. And I'm going back down. This was 1908. This was a runabout, sporty. I mean, I can look at this and kind of picture a model, an MGTD or TC, similar to this. It was also the steering was on the right side. That would obviously change over, at least in the United States. And of course, these are not electric lights. These are lit by probably carbide. And these two are the Model A, the original Model A, which was built 1903 and 1904. And then the Model C, which replaced this one. And you can see the difference. This has the radiator. And you can look up here and see that this does not have the cooling. And there was a cooling problem on that. I mean, you don't have a radiator, you're going to have a problem with your car overheating. So that was something that had to be included. And this is a picture of Henry Ford with his little derby on, and he's driving his quadricycle. It was a functional vehicle. I mean, this came out of his head. He didn't have a team of people working with him. He did this himself. And here, of course, is a picture of Henry Ford in 1919. You can see he was kind of a dapper guy, dressed well. And he could get his hands dirty, but when he had to clean up, he looked pretty sharp. Of course, by this time, he was worth a lot of money, and we went from there. I did a lot of research on this, and I've got a number of references here on the bottom to show the bibliography. And once I can get this thing loaded into the blog, I'll be able to, you'll be able to read where I got my sources from. And this is all broken down. And these are video references that I had from getting photographs and accessing some Ford Motor Company's biography on this. So I'm looking forward to having your responses to this, and I appreciate it. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time to watch. Have a good afternoon.